You'll hear me 3 or 4 times a week shout, "I didn't do a business degree," because I was a salesman, and
Yeah.
specifically, I worked on my own. Like, I was really good at working on my own. Sure, I'd work within a team to beat them, be on my own. I'd wanna be the best person within that team, and I'll steal your leads, I'll do whatever, like, that was
I'm not
just
going to
how
create a toxic workplace, right? So there's a whole
that was who I
idea.
was.
Ooh. This is the other conversation piece here. When you work in a sales, I don't know, every sales job I've ever worked in, there's been this like inner competition with each other, and it can either be really, really awesome,
Mhm.
or it can actually create toxicity in the
Horrid.
workplace. However, I actually one of my good friends, Mike Watman, actually taught me this. Competition actually comes from working together to achieve a goal.
Mm.
So it's actually not competing one on one against each other. So it's actually how do we develop a healthy competitive environment without it turning toxic, right?
Yeah,
Because it's easy to become really
so
toxic.
hard.
Stealing someone's leads isn't cool. I had a girl that used to steal all my sales. I'm like, what are you? And I would just sit there and like, whatever. Like, I'm like, whatever. Like, you do you if that's what you need to do. But it was like, did I ever want to help her? Absolutely not. Like,
I
absolutely not.
I was employed at the same time as someone else to be a lead generator. We had a disagreement over a lead. I think they may have stolen my lead, but whatever. There was a lead problem. It was the tiniest problem. And we sat next to each other for 3 months and we didn't speak once. Like every meeting we were in together. When they wanted us, they would call us one name. It was like, you two, like, Batman and Robin, come on all the time, right? And we didn't say a word to each other because there was this horrendous, like, yeah, like I said, exactly what you're saying, just this need to compete and this want to, succeed. But when I worked here, I say here, right, because I took over the building that I worked in a previous job. When I first started in that job, was the first place where they told me the sales manager was saying to me, it's like if they don't want it, that's okay. And I was like, oh, yeah. And they were like, don't call someone else will. You can call somebody else. You can speak to somebody else. You don't have to like force that down someone's throat. And when one of us didn't hit target, we would all sit around and be like, well, what happened? As opposed to it being like, he hit his target, so he's going to tell you how good he is. And like, yeah, well, I made more phone calls, I got better relationships, and instead it was like a free form conversation around like, well, I've been really attacking this industry recently with this conversation, which I found opened a bunch of leads, and we had that chat, and it was the first time where whenever anyone was kind of like falling behind, should we say, it wasn't then that the entire sales team went, oh, and didn't, stop talking to them about work. And then the only person who was meant to discuss that was the sales manager. And they were just like, oh no, oh no. Instead, it became a conversation with like, hey man, like, didn't come in, huh? And be like, nah, man, what am I going to do? I mean, you'd have that kind of camaraderie as opposed to competition, which was
Yeah.
just a wonderful, wonderful
Well, you're
thing in
going
the
to have
sales team.
a more successful sales team that way. And at the end of the day, not everyone's going to be a top performer. That doesn't
No.
necessarily mean that the other people in the sales team are not they're not good people or they're not good, right? It's just they might
Everyone in the
serve
Formula One is an incredible driver. There's still someone at the back, right? They're still the best drivers
100%.
in the world.
100%. And the other thing that you got to remember is that not every salesperson wants to be top performer. Some
Mm,
salespeople are just really happy working at their craft, developing new skills, entering a new industry, and maybe just hitting target, but they're really enjoying it. And if you put that additional pressure on them, you've also got to remember, right? I remember being in sales for me when everything was like awesome at home and I wasn't unwell. I was like, wicked, I can be top performer. Like, that's amazing. But when I was a bit stressed out, I was feeling unwell, something was happening at home. It was
mm,
actually just easy for me just to coast a little bit, hit my target, still do what I need to
sure.
do. So I was still doing what I had to do, but I wasn't overachieving and over exceeding. And,
Mm,
having that additional pressure on me would have actually made me not like my job. And so understanding that sometimes salespeople, we want them to be performing at their best, but not everyone's going to want to be as hungry as the next salesperson. And I think
mm,
as a manager, you've got to understand individual motivations of their role and understand those motivations can change. They can increase, they can decrease. You've got
yeah.
people that might have just become a parent for the first time that might drive them to actually want to do better for in their job, or the opposite, it actually might mean, I'm just happy to coast a little bit. I still want to achieve my target, but I want to
Yeah.
get home at a reasonable hour to spend time with my family. So it's not discrediting everyone and understanding the individual motivation. So having those conversations is like, hey, where you're at, what do you need?
Mm,
What is your motivation right now, and what's your goals? And I think that that's a healthier way, because at the end of the day, I've been in sales roles where it's like be performing all the time, and don't you, if you've gone from 150% of target and you're now at 125, what's wrong with you? It's like, but I'm still doing really well, right? Like, I'm just having a bad time at home. It's like, it's toxic and it's not helpful. And when we're looking at sales cultures and we're looking at that, we need the kind of the relationships with our team members to actually, support each other. And if you have a bad day in sales and you are a lone wolf, those days are so much more lonelier. They're so much more painful. Like, I had a mate, if I had a bad sales call, we'd a walkie-talkie, and I'd be like, dude, I've had the worst call. She'd be like, come in, let's have a chat about it. Like, what did you do? And if I'd like completely screwed up, she was like, well, like, it would be like, we'd joke about it. She made me feel better. Like, it
Yeah,
wasn't,
sure.
and her and I never competed against each other. Her and I were always right next to each other on the leaderboard. One of us was number one or number two. We didn't really care who it was. It was just like, here is the mantle to you now, right? We've never competed against each other. And it was the
Amazing.
healthiest sales role I ever had, or sales relationship. And that's important for teams as well
Mm.
to understand, especially within the recruitment world. I know that can be
In
it's a very
those roles,
competitive industry.
in those roles, it's very competitive. It's very high pressure. I mean, recruitment for me is such a weird thing to sell, because like you're telling me I can sell a product and then it could like get up and walk away and I haven't sold it anymore. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's
I
like one of
hate
the
that idea.
hardest jobs you can possibly do. So
100%,
yeah.
100%. And the fact that, you're dealing with people all the time. You're trying to deal with the recruitment manager, who's actually, or the hiring manager there, and you're trying to make them sure that they're happy and they get everything they need. Then like 15 candidates, you're trying to make sure that they're the right people and keep them going and grab 3 of them from there with the right thing. And is everyone happy? And it's an awful lot of pressure. And I think one of the things which really, I think, pushed a lot of people to burnout, especially during the pandemic, was like other people's pressure.
Yeah.
All of the pressure just got dialed up around the world. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, it's wonderful it became part of a conversation and that people actually were willing to talk about it. But all of a sudden it meant people were going like, hey, but I'm going to talk about it now as well. And, pressure begets pressure. And I think, obviously, with a lot of business owners, the buck stops at them.
Yeah.
So all that pressure just ends up, and they end up like Atlas with the weight of the world on their shoulders. So,
Absolutely. I think being business owner through the pandemic was probably the hardest thing, because you go on LinkedIn now, they're the ones that keep getting thrown under the bus. Like, I really feel for CEOs, business owners, managers, leaders, where they're all just like, it's like, the CEO is a devil. And it's like, are they? Like, what's going on with that? Like,
weren't they the person who gave you a job?
like, weren't they the person trying to keep the lights on, make sure you had a job during the pandemic? Like, you have no idea the pressure that person felt. And CEOs are human beings, right? Like, leaders are human beings, managers are human beings. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to do like bad things. That's not to say that every single leader, every single CEO, every single manager is a terrible person. There might be some, but
That's nice
they're
to
human
hear.
beings, right?
That is nice to hear. It's not what I read, but that's nice to hear occasionally.
Oh, if you believe everything on LinkedIn, you'd see just like, you would probably have like devil horns on your head, right?
100%. And, especially for making everybody come into an office, that makes me I'm going to have a tail and a pitchfork as well. So, Katie, we try and keep this, as you know, as an hour so people can enjoy it during their lunch and then get back to it. But I personally think the messaging that you are speaking about is incredibly important to a lot of people. And what you do, unlike a lot of people in your space, is you give away so much free information on your social channels. So for the people out there who want to follow you, where do they find you?
So obviously LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, jump up. Where have you been? No, I'm joking. I'm just connected with me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting up little tidbits, little bits in here, just, things like that. So follow me on LinkedIn. I've got so many podcasts, so many blogs on my website as well. So you can go to www.getyourshittogether.io, not .com.io. Loads of blogs there, loads of resources there as well. And obviously, if you just want to reach out and have a chat, I'm pretty crazy with that. However, if you do want to randomly come along to a webinar, I am putting on a free webinar next Wednesday, especially if you're a leader and you want to come along and learn a little bit about how to manage your own burnout and prevent burnout within your team. I'm going to be doing a 1-hour webinar next Wednesday. So if you want to come to that.
Quick testimonial. I'm going to come because I haven't been. The last one I went to was just so useful. Absolutely phenomenal. If you are a business leader, the one worry you have, or if you know, if you're anyone, right? One worry you have about a free webinar is that it's going to be like 15% useful and 40, the rest of it is 85% is just going to be like buy my thing.
Mhm.
I gained what other people would have charged 10 grand for from an hour and a half chatting with a group and Katie. And not only just from what Katie was saying, like you're a brilliant moderator of the room, right? Of
Mhm.
on the call. That was phenomenal. But like the other experiences from other people on that webinar, so helpful just to be, even if you're just like, huh, me too. Cool. But really, really useful. And I can honestly say, like, if you are out there and any of these kind of topics have come up or in your mind, then Katie's a brilliant person to follow. And if they're not in your mind, Katie's a really important person to follow. So, so Katie, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. I learned so much. And like I say, following is great for having a back and forth conversation and getting some of my question answered even better.
No stress.
Appreciate it. Mr. Mason, take us to the bridge because damn it, we're done. Ooh. Well, there it is, kids. There it is. The wonderful Miss Katie Maycock, just bringing knowledge bombs left, right, and center to us. Let's be honest. I don't know anyone who hasn't experienced being far too stressed. I don't know anyone who hasn't turned around at some point and said, like, God, everything's just too much right now. I can't do this. Happens to us all. And that isn't burnout, right? That's being stressed is a thing and being able to say that to yourself. But pushing that line, when you start seeing the fourth, fifth, sixth marker that Katie mentioned earlier in the show, when you start pushing past those markers of burnout, you're going to get to a point where it takes so much to come back, right? If you get to the point where you're months in with no exercise, it's really hard to start exercising and you've got a whole mountain to climb. Well, that is the same on a number of different things. So I really think if you're experiencing anything that's been brought up in today's show, like follow Katie. Don't follow me, right? Don't hit like, don't hit subscribe. Rarely do you hear me say this on this show, but I'm not the person you should be following if you're having any of these issues. You should follow Katie. She knows what she's talking about. And she's one of the most giving, nicest people I've ever met online. You can DM her and she will spend absolutely tons of her time just to help, right? She's literally in this to help. So go out there, follow Katie. She's absolutely excellent. Hit like, hit subscribe on her content, and you're going to find yourself in a better place if you ever have any of these struggles that we talked about. Thanks very much for joining us. See you on the next episode of The Daily Show.